few years ago, this broken-ass system marked me as a criminal risk, linked me to some shit I didn't even do because it was probable.
Once in the system,
Always in the system.
So here's the thing with Watch Dogs 2. It's arrived 2 years later, and the hype is non-existent. And you just have to look at the sales of Watch Dogs 2 to see that in effect. I mean, the original sold 380,000 units according to ChartTrack, and this sequel has turned in 80,000. Despite the fact that Watch Dogs 2 is a pretty solid game, you have to look at this as a reflection of the marketplace. Many consumers are voting with their wallet. Regardless of that, Watch Dogs 2 is a very solid game, and there are many things worth taking away, as it is quite a notable standout amongst a sea of other recommendable titles for 2016. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and this is our full review for Watch Dogs 2. Now this time around, you're going to be playing as Marcus Holloway. He's a hacker just like Aiden Pearce was in the original, although this time he's actually likable. He's actually very enjoyable. He's very fun to hang out with. He's the kind of guy that gets stuck into a social circle and brings people together. Most people want to be around Marcus, and you essentially get to be the quote-unquote life of the party, bringing this ragged band of hackers together and forming the San Francisco wing of DedSec, the returning hacker group from the original game, and that is given sort of a fresh lease on life because we get to see it from this younger perspective. Holloway and his friends, Wrench, Satara, they very much have this youthful mentality. They're very much just, let's get out there, let's get our name out there, let's brand everything with DedSec, let's spray paint the walls, and, you know, let's quote-unquote things up. I mean, it's the hacker mentality from top to bottom. It's very anonymous light. And granted, that tone is going to put some people off. There's a lot of, you know, trollish internet meme-based humor in here. But I think Watch Dogs owns it. I think that because they deep dive on it so heavily, that if you go along for the ride, it's very enjoyable to see in motion. Now, the main crux of the story centers on the return of the CTOS operating system from the original game, the overarching computer program that runs everything from cars to cell phones to TVs and everything, basically allowing you to control everything, providing you know how to access the code. Now, this is the same setup that was given in the original, but following Aiden Pearce's exploits in that original game, CTOS and Bloom, the company behind it, have doubled down on their efforts and actually made even more things controllable. It's sort of a over-the-top reaction to the amount of things that went wrong in that game, giving you, the player, more control over everything in the process. At the end of the day, it's just an excuse to let you control the whole world from a phone, which from a gameplay perspective, completely works. The entire setup of the game centers around you gathering followers, distributing your DedSec app, under the proviso that the more people who download your app will then give DedSec access to their computing power, therefore growing DedSec's reach over time. Now, this is the big thing with Watch Dogs 2. You can tell that Ubisoft listened to every single criticism from the original and kind of went back to the drawing board in redesigning every aspect of Watch Dogs 2. Something like the hacking, which was just criticized for being a one-button type thing in the original, now you can hold a button and bring up 4 options for anything. So, say you aim at a car and hold the button down, you'll bring up a menu that will then allow you to drive it remotely using 4 separate commands. You can point at people's phones and cause distractions, or you can overheat them and get them to electrocute themselves. There's a lot more going on from a base gameplay mechanical point of view than was ever in the original. And although things like the steam grates return, you can still blow stuff up if you're in the middle of a car chase to distract your pursuers, the vast majority of these quick interactions just come from a couple of button presses, which is really refreshing. Although that does have the knock-on effect of making the control scheme something that you really do need to get used to. There are a lot of ways to control Watch Dogs 2 in terms of jumping between Marcus and driving and using his deployable drones, and just getting used to how the buttons work contextually can take a little bit of a learning curve. As I mentioned before, the whole game centers around gathering followers and distributing DedSec's app. So regardless of the fact that you do go up against this major corporation, it always stays grounded in the fact that you have this group of friends who just want to get their name out there. So everything you do gameplay-wise is always in service of getting more followers, getting more exposure for DedSec. Whether that means taking down some high-profile celebrity, leaking the exclusive sample of a new rap track, or just graffitiing your DedSec name over some high-profile comms tower, all of it is in service of getting the DedSec name out there. Now, there are quite a few very short side missions. Now, they're definitely aimed towards being memorable in terms of the writing or the comedic effect. There's a very potent Martin Shkreli comparison where you go after this guy who's very much like Martin Shkreli. He's holding back medication that the populace needs, and you teach him a lesson kind of thing. But it's all over in a sort of about 15 minutes. Many of the side missions mimic this sort of thing, and as much as Watch Dogs 2's gameplay is very engaging, you're always hopping between gunplay and sneaking and using your drones and climbing. Many of these things don't really get used to their full potential when you're out on a side mission or even in the main missions. Now, the core gameplay of Watch Dogs 2 is a third-person action stealth game. It plays very much like Assassin's Creed. It plays very much like the original in terms of your moment-to-moment gameplay. At any given time, you're mostly taking cover, you're mostly sneaking through certain facilities, and although you're given the option to go all guns blazing, the general response to that means that you'll be cut to ribbons within seconds. I mean, most of your offensive capabilities boil down to hacking phones to cause distractions, or eventually unlocking the likes of explosives and popping steam pipes, but they're all contextual. Most of the time the game wants you to be stealthy, and it gives you a couple of drones to help in with that. So to get followers, there are a bunch of ways you can do it. There are many side missions that, as I said, are over quite quickly, but you can also take part in Watch Dogs 2's version of Instagram, which is called Scout X. Now, you'll see different prompts pop up on your phone and tell you that there are landmarks nearby, and if you go up to them and take photos with them, you can get some followers that way. Now, sadly, the bottom line with the gameplay is that the vast majority of missions boil down to try and infiltrate a place, realize you can't get through a certain door, go find the thing that unlocks that door, and then go through the door and complete your objective. There are many things around that, such as the drone infiltration, such as, firearms and stealth and takedowns and taking your time to get through these places. But when you actually look at the steps that need to be taken to get through these main missions, they're nearly all exactly the same. Now, another poignant negative that stood out to me was that the stealth is very much old school, and to some degree, it feels a little bit broken. It's very much how the likes of Splinter Cell used to handle stealth, where if one guard sees you, the entire base is just on alert straight away. Watch Dogs doesn't build on where Metal Gear Solid 2 came from, where if you can get to a guard fast enough, you can stop them. In Watch Dogs 2, if your little alert meter fills up, even if you then manage to silence the person before they've shouted or shot a gun or radioed something in, the whole base is going to be descending on you, and most of the time that means your mission has failed, especially if you're going for a stealthier, more ghost-like playthrough. Now, sadly, at the time of recording, the vast majority of Watch Dogs 2's multiplayer is actually just broken. It's just offline. In fact, when you boot the game up, it just pops up and says, hey, we're having a bunch of issues and we're going to get around to this and fix it as soon as possible. But as I say, I've just had no opportunity to try it. The seamless multiplayer is offline, which is supposed to mimic the original game and Dark Souls style of just dropping another player into your world when you least expect it and having you just fight them, dynamically, which is a really cool idea, but I didn't get a chance to try it. If it's anything like the original game, hopefully it'll hold up. Now, there is a certain mode that you can still take part in, where you can buddy up with a friend and explore the world together, but as far as any of the co-op missions or the general seamless dynamic multiplayer aspect, that just isn't working right now. So if that turns out that it's an incredible component and a very vital part of the game, we'll totally do a follow-up video, but as for now, there's just not been any way to review it. And lastly, there are 3 things that you need to know. Number 1, this is infinitely better than the original, just from top to bottom. The characters, the world, the presentation, the tone, it's just inviting, it's playful, it's just fun. They want you to get out there and just experiment with the vast array of gadgets that you have on offer. Number 2, the campaign is very short. If you're focusing on the main missions only, you can pretty much blow through this in about 4 to 5 hours. Because the vast majority, like I said, what you need to do to get through these missions just tends to be done first time through. You find the key, you go through the door, you activate the checkpoint, next cutscene, next mission. There's not that much mechanical variation in terms of the necessity of using the gadgets that you've built up, and that did allow me to blow through the main missions very fast. And number 3, it makes a fantastic first impression, but sadly that doesn't really carry through. When you first boot up Watch Dogs 2, you'll be amazed by the graphics, the acting, the detail in the world itself, everything from the sea lions to the likes of the Golden Gate Bridge. It looks absolutely stunning, and you'll have a blast just experimenting with your drones and your different powers, and those first few hours are really enjoyable. But sadly, when you drill it down and you play this thing for a big chunk of time, the gameplay mechanics start to get very repetitive, the structure of the missions gets to be repetitive, and there's no real end game once you finish the main and the side missions. In the end, Watch Dogs 2 pretty much does for the series what Assassin's Creed Black Flag did for Assassin's Creed. Now, I don't think it's an exemplary game, I don't think it's one of 2016's finest, but I also don't think that you should just completely ignore it and just leave it behind. Watch Dogs 2 is outstanding at realizing that original creative vision, and for that, I'm going to give it a 3.5 stars.
It's time we stand together.
The numbers haven't stopped climbing.
And what are we gonna do?
Aim bigger.